We are in the grip of a rental and homeless crisis, the likes we've never seen before in this, the lucky country. Too many people, not enough homes, creating misery and a sense of hopelessness. But are there any solutions?
Australia's housing crisis going up in flames.
Is this the most tense you've seen in a little while?
Yeah, absolutely. I've never seen anything like it.
Families facing homelessness.
Have you had the discussion with them that they might need to live in a tent?
They know what the rental crisis at the moment is.
Without a long-term plan, we're not getting out of this crisis.
Right now, experts say this is the worst housing crisis we've seen in decades. The rental vacancy rate across the country has dipped to just 1.1%.
Okay, so today we are going to Australia, and Australia is experiencing something that I didn't know it was bad to this level. I thought housing crisis was bad in Canada and other places, but Australia is holding the trophy right now. I didn't know how terrible the situation really is until I started diving deep into it, and I couldn't believe it. Before I begin, please consider liking, subscribing so that we can grow this channel. We're gonna look today at several clips that are basically gonna try to answer the question, what in the hell is happening in Australia in terms of housing crisis and what can be done to solve the housing crisis. Every year, millions of new immigrants come into Australia, and there is not enough houses already. So the population is growing, but things remain exactly the same. So let's go right into the next clip to see exactly what's happening in the housing nightmare that's going on currently in Australia.
Across the country, buying a quarter-acre block was once the great Aussie dream. But now, for so many, just paying the rent is a nightmare. Tonight, Chris Reason look at what's causing our housing crisis and what can be possibly done to turn it around.
It doesn't look like much, and the owner will tell you it isn't. A 4-bedroom sheet metal fixer-upper.
Probably needs a clean, but this is the bath.
No hot water, but it's home for Elise McDonough.
I haven't had a hot shower since the 5th of January 2023.
Unable to afford her rent in Sydney, she Googled cheapest house in Australia and got this, on the edge of the Nullarbor Plain, for under 12 grand.
I'm here just because I had no other options.
Since COVID 2020, house prices have surged nationally 45%. Rents the same.
Jesus Christ, that's crazy. Like, I know it was quite difficult during COVID time, especially if you wanted to travel to Australia. They had this very strict lockdown, but I guess they opened up after COVID and things got way crazy. So many people moved in. We're gonna see several, like a ranking of the countries that moved in the most, like India, China, immigrants, all in these videos that we're gonna watch. So please, as you watch, please like and subscribe.
Australia is in the midst of a housing crisis. It's undeniable.
Elise McDonough's move to the Nullarbor Plain is admittedly an extreme example of the nation's housing crisis. But there is no doubt that millions of Australians are struggling to put a roof over their heads. Experts cite 3 key reasons: the population explosion, negative gearing and tax breaks for investors, and supply shortages. First, of homes and land. All this land, and you can't do anything with it.
Yeah, no, correct. Very frustrating.
In Austral, Western Sydney, developer Romeo Tamburi says there are 17,000 lots approved for homes here, but they've waited 5 years now for water and sewer infrastructure.
But here we are, standing here almost in a stagnant position where we just cannot get the product out.
Nationwide, the housing industry is also suffering shortages of workers, brickies, roofers, an endangered species. Matt Gannon now recruits from his local prison.
It was just an option. It was the only option we could sort of think of.
He says most just find it too hard when more money can be made stacking shelves.
We're not going to have anyone to lay roofs in 10, 15 years. What do you do? Who's putting roofs on houses if nobody's getting apprenticeships and learning how to do it?
The last financial year was the worst for new home builds in a decade.
Australia's housing market is like no other in the world.
Right now, 35% of us are paying off a mortgage, 31% own outright, and so close behind, 30.6% are renting. It looks like Australia is about to have more renters than outright owners for the first time ever.
Okay, so the situation is crazy because you can see they are not building enough houses. There's nobody really willing to build the houses because nobody wants to work that labor, and they have to even rely on prisoners. And to make matters worse, the small rentals that they have, you have to compete against hundreds of other applicants. So you're going to be trying to rent a house, you're going to go and then you're going to find this crazy line of people all wanting to rent the same house. And that's not all. Some people who already live, let's say you are renting a place, you're just going to get a notice one day from your landlord like, okay, I want you out. So these people, I don't know how it got this bad. I was trying to research and I saw things like negative gearing. And I was wondering what's negative gearing. And it's basically like a tax break that they're giving people. Okay, let's use a quick example. Let's say you buy a house and then you're mortgaging a house, and at the end of the year, the amount of expenses like the mortgages and everything are exceeding what the actual profit, like the actual income that should be generated from the house is. So let's say at the end of the year you're getting like, let's say, a $10,000 loss. If you're working another job at the same time, you can put that $10,000 loss on your income taxes that you're working on this other job. So investors are using this negative gearing as a way to lower their taxes on the other income, in the hopes that if they keep using this, that one day in the future the property is gonna get enough value to make them a profit. So in the short term they are gaining by paying lesser taxes on their income because they are using this negative gearing, making like losses every time on these properties, rental properties they own, and then they use those losses to offset their income for the other job. And then hopefully in the long term, when they sell the property, it's made a profit. So it makes it so hard for people who want to own a home. So Australia is in quite a shit show, let's just say the truth, because people are living in tents. I looked at it, I thought, is this California? Because California is like tent city. And then I saw people living in tents. Some people are living in containers. They're like just putting a bed inside a container. Some people are living in the outback. And even there, it's crazy. I don't know if there are any Australians in the comments. You could try to enlighten us. But also, the interest rates are so bad. Like the interest keeps rising. The population keeps rising. Like everything that could go wrong is going wrong at the same time. So let's continue with another clip to see how a normal Australian, like the reality is right now in Australia.
Since Australia's borders reopened post-COVID, there's been a surge in immigration arrivals. Almost 1.1 million people in 3 years.
The current figures are unprecedented. There's one new arrival here every 44 seconds, and if you want to get an understanding of Australia's immigration influx, there is no better place to do it than at our airports.
The population now has just raced past 27 million. 8.2 million of us were born overseas. And right now, most are coming from India.
It's the land of opportunities.
Just arrived pharmacist Rennie and nurse Shruti. After a 2-year visa process, they have jobs waiting in regional Australia.
We're too much excited. Better living.
Good living.
Lifestyle.
The number of Indian-born residents has doubled in 10 years. But there are concerns about our population future.
Okay, I'm just going to pause there to say, I know in this channel I've done a video on Indians before, Indians immigrating to Canada. This is not me picking on Indians or anything. I just cover the news. So this was pure coincidence. It just happened that Indians are also moving to Australia. It was coincidence. I'm not guilty. So please, Indian people, don't get mad at me at the comments or anything. It's just a coincidence. Let's continue the story. And also, I hope I was a little clear with the negative gearing explanation. Maybe it was all over the place, but you got the point. So apologies to Indians. Let's continue.
Australia has no population plan. It has no population policy.
The top 4 sources of immigrants, all Asia, India, China, Philippines, Nepal, the UK and New Zealand falling down the order.
That is an enormous shift, a changing of the guard, if you will.
We've come to Point Cook, 30 kilometres outside Melbourne. This is officially Australia's most multicultural suburb. In Point Cook, 52% of residents were born overseas. They come from 86 different countries. Locals call it, though, a multicultural success story. With fears the Great Australian Melting Pot is simmering, a recipe for disaster, here it's low crime, high earnings, education. At the pop-up park, we've popped in for lunch.
Can I just ask quickly, is anybody here born in Australia?
No.
Over 30% of us were born overseas. It hasn't been that high since the 1890s.
Is it working?
I believe it is working. We need the nurses, we need the doctors, all add something into the mix that helps Australia to grow.
They dismiss fears migrants take jobs and houses, arguing they create them.
The thing is, they don't happen overnight. A lot of work has gone in the last 10-15 years, which we have all put.
Migrants contribute on a net basis more to a local economy than they take.
But how much pressure is it adding to issues like housing, health, the cost of living? We'll investigate over the week.
Okay, so as you can see, those immigrants who are covered there, they are quite successful, they're living good, but that's not the reality for most people in Sydney, because you could barely find a place to rent. Even if you find a place, you have to battle it out with 100 other people wanting to rent the same place. It is quite a desperate situation, and I can see why Australians who are born in Australia might start getting a little angry at immigrants coming in. Now we're gonna go to another video. After this, we're gonna go to another video to see what the government is trying to do, Australian government is trying to do in terms of students, international students going to Australia. Australia, I think the biggest export for Australia is colleges. There are very, very good schools in Australia, and so many international students always want to go to Australia to study. I was one of them many decades ago. I wanted to go to Australia to study, but then I ended up moving to America. But the thing is, it's quite desperate situation for a typical Australian. I'm sure we're gonna see how some are going on food banks just to get food to eat. So it's quite desperate. I'm really feeling for Australians.
Experts say a long-term plan is long overdue.
It is beyond time that Australia commits to a population plan, to a population policy,
keeping the immigration mix in harmony. Chris Reason, 7 News.
Welcome back. Tonight in our 5-part Big Australia series, we investigate the cost of living crisis. While the Albanese government keeps telling us the economy is in good shape, for many, day-to-day life is anything but good. Chief reporter Chris Reason reveals some confronting numbers and introduces some Aussies who say they've been left behind.
Measuring the cost of living crisis the old-fashioned way, in feet. This is the queue on any ordinary day at food charity Oz Harvest.
Make no mistake, Australia is in the midst of a cost of living crisis.
In the last 2 years, demand for Oz Harvest help has surged 60%. Susanna Dropper says they're now serving 2,500 customers 6 days a week.
It is said that the demand is growing, and we think that the situation is not improving.
Official stats show 3.3 million Australians live in poverty, a quarter of them children. Who is defined as poor? Any couple with 2 kids on about $1,000 a week, any single who earns under $500 a week. And then there are those in another category altogether.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Peter Cruikshank is 53 and a former Westpac manager whose life collapsed into homelessness after recent trauma.
Unexpected, definitely.
Her budget? She gets $425 a week Oz study, spends $300 at a boarding house, leaving $20 a day to live off. The food spend?
Not much, but yeah, we can do it between $5 and $10 a day if you have to.
She used to have 2 or 3 coffees a day, now lives off the price of one.
Being able to spend that on a coffee now, I couldn't even imagine it.
The Hunger Report found 2 million Australians experienced food insecurity in the last year, skipping meals, going without.
Since COVID, Australian households have been hammered. Inflation is coming down, but prices remain so high. Housing, rents, insurance, power, some climbed 20-30% in the last 2 years.
And so as you can see in those clips, things are not looking good for everyday Australian. The housing is crazy. Even if you have a place, I don't think people are really buying houses, because which houses are you gonna buy? There is really no houses to buy. It's eventually gonna be rental in everything. You're gonna have to rent everything, but that's gonna bring anger on immigrants, because this is just it's gonna blow up very soon. It's a ticking time bomb, and it's gonna blow up very soon, because the government of Australia is failing. That's the truth. It's not really the immigrants' fault, according to me. I mean, I'm sure people have their own opinions, but according to me, it is the government's responsibility to build public housing. They have not done it. They are not doing it. They are doing it. Even if they are doing it, they are doing it very slow. Very, very slow. And on top of that, they are allowing the Australian universities to just take in so many international students, because the Australian universities depend on basically their income relies on the international students. That's why they're taking in a lot. And these students have to live somewhere. You cannot live on the streets, and that adds to the pressure on housing. And then that's going to cause tension with the locals. But let's look at this last clip where the government is apparently trying to limit the number of international students coming into Australia this year. Okay, let's go to the clip.
The billion-dollar industry at the centre of a political migration debate. Australia has long been an international study destination of choice.
Mainly, I had like two options. I had Canada and Australia in my mind.
If you want to get some good knowledge and everything, so Australia is like preferred one.
Now the government is moving to cap international student arrivals. Speaking today at a Senate inquiry, university representatives said the government is rushing through legislation that will stifle financial viability and put thousands of jobs at risk.
We believe the bill, as drafted, is more a political smokescreen than an instrument for good policy.
The government says it has introduced the bill to amend the integrity of education services, including weeding out dodgy operators, seeking to address issues that came to light through recent reviews into visa exploitation and the migration system.
This exploitation can range from providing poor quality education products to high student fees and false promises of pathways to permanent migration.
The bill consists of 8 parts. The most contentious include the ability for the government to cap international student enrolments, including giving the Education Minister power to limit numbers in specific courses and cancel courses completely.
They are draconian, interventionist and amount to economic vandalism.
Universities say they have already been impacted by high rates of student visa refusals, especially in regional Australia, where universities have seen a major decline in international student revenue since the pandemic. They say unintended consequences could impact regional Australia most of all.
The impact of having some 60,000 fewer international students arrive on our shores is significant. It would represent a $4.3 billion hit to the economy and could cost the university sector alone over 14,000 jobs.
Education is Australia's largest service export, and the changes could have knock-on impacts into other industries like tourism. The committee will report next week before the bill progresses.
Okay, so that's it really. So the government is debating whether they should limit the number of international students coming in. But the main issues really, even if they limit that, I mean, that's one of the issues. They have to limit immigration at some point, or they have to stop the negative gearing. They have to find another way. They have to fix the tax system, because that's really, I think, the main culprit in this. And they have to build houses. There is no escaping that. So if there are any Australians, please comment below and let me know how things are and what you think should be done to help improve the situation. Please consider liking and subscribing so that we can grow this channel. And of course, share this on all the networks. I'll see you.
Oh my goodness, all the networks! Wow! All the networks!